This program is brought to you by Tab. Long may we play.
Searcy, welcome to the final Thoroughbreds Are Go for 2020. Coming up, Sydney's champion trainer Chris Waller, passionate about rehoming thoroughbreds and encouraging owners to play their part. Binary stud with some familiar names being looked after away from racing. The thoroughbred guru Scott Brodie with another tip on training your thoroughbred off the track. And another story of thoroughbreds being loved in training and away from racing in Arrowfield Studs Strappers Stories. That's all coming up on this edition of Thoroughbreds Are Go. As Sydney's champion trainer now for years, Chris Waller has had thousands of horses come through his stables here at Rosehill Gardens in Sydney. Some of them, such as Winks, have been out-and-out champions, others not so much, but they all need a new home when they finish their racing career. Chris is passionate about the welfare of thoroughbreds and donates to several organisations, including Thoroughbreds Are Go, and he's very happy to talk about his ideas on how to best rehome your horse away from the racetrack.
Winks right down the outside.
Chris, I know obviously the welfare of horses, all horses, but particularly obviously the thoroughbreds that you specialise in is so important to you. What sort of message do you think we need to be sending to, in particular, owners about the responsibility of caring for their thoroughbreds away from racing?
I think the message we need to get across is how racing is perceived and how animal welfare is continued to strengthen, so that we're seen to be abiding by community standards of what they expect. Of course, there's going to be a small percentage of those out there that will never be satisfied, but we must keep the majority satisfied and continue to improve with making this great sport better. There's been so many people that have set it up for us, it's now our job to set it up for the future.
The reality can be harder though, I guess, to actually find homes for these horses. What would you suggest? I mean, we obviously have to work in with the equestrian world, don't we, really, to not just, you know, they don't always find that forever home straight away, do they?
No, they don't. What we've got to follow up on when a horse leaves our care is to make sure that we just don't forget the horse. We've got to do our own little checks to make sure that they are at the right place, make sure they're going to the right home, that person's going to care for them, they've got a good history, because when a horse does leave, I think we've all been guilty of saying, well, we found that horse a great home, but you find out a month later, a year later, through many reasons, the horse slips into the wrong hands. So these horses have been so good to us, it's our job and it's our responsibility to make sure they're getting what we've got from them, and that's a beautiful life after racing. At whatever age it may be, they might not make it to a racetrack, it's still our responsibility to make sure they find a home, make sure they're well looked after, and I commend people like Racing New South Wales in particular, and the individuals and participants in racing to make sure that this does happen.
And we're obviously in a different society where kids aren't as close to horses. There's a bit of a perception about the welfare issue that people don't care for horses from a lot of welfare groups. But you've actually addressed that. You've tackled that sort of head on and had the RSPCA out here. Tell me about that.
Well, we certainly see it as an important issue that needs to be dealt with. So yeah, we got on the front foot and reached out to Bitter Jones, she's the head of the RSPCA in Australia, and invited her to the stables and showed around, and it was great to have her here and also to learn what they think, how they perceive things, and what meaningful change we can bring to at least start satisfying those types of standards. And I really respect the RSPCA. We're all animal lovers in this sport, and obviously horses are so good to us. So just giving people the insight about what a tongue tie is and how it's put on and how a horse may feel, and that to me, when I was explaining it to Bitter, was interesting how she portrayed it, along with the whip and how it's used, and through to rehoming, making sure horses are traced, traceability, and until you really stop and see how the sport may be portrayed by a few, we won't improve it. And I think that there's been some really good changes. We're well on the way, but we shouldn't rest on our laurels. We make sure we continue to improve, and whatever changes can be made, we will.
I heard a good quote on radio this morning saying that you get rid of your enemies by making them friends, and that's what you need to do, I guess, that approach. But what was her view back? Do you think it actually really opened her eyes up, and the RSPCA, about how much these horses are loved?
Yeah, very much so. We're very lucky in the city, as a city trainer, as I am, because we've got great facilities, we've got access to vets every day. The cash flows are plentiful in a metropolitan racing stable, but we've got to respect beyond that as well. So they could see that we've got big spaces, the horses are exercised properly, they're fed properly, their feet are done, you name it. We've got to respect that there's a lot of horses, not just in racing. We've got to take ownership, I think, of other breeds of horses as well, because we do have a governing body where a lot of horse sports may not, and certainly may not have the penalties that racing can impose on people. So I think it's our responsibility to not just show it for racehorses, but to make sure every horse is loved for and cared for till the end day.
So Chris, when you're rehoming horses through Chris Waller Racing, horses that you've trained, you have quite an involved process that Soph Baker and the team have set up to make sure that every horse is going to the right home for that horse.
It's given a thorough check. That information is passed on to the new owner, or sometimes these horses are even given away, so that person fully knows of any issues it may have from previous injuries that might have been 2 years ago, that might end up in arthritis or some other issues. It might be behaviour issues. We don't just want a thoroughbred that runs fast going to a young rider that doesn't have confidence, so we want to make sure that that horse has a passport to follow the horse wherever it may go. And further to that, making sure you know where the horse is going to, that person has a good record and history. If not, ask questions and get a reference for that person, and little things like that. Then of course we've got Racing New South Wales and their rehoming program, which is fantastic, and we've had to put some horses through there that we haven't been able to place, and what a magnificent job they do, whether it be showing people visitors to racing at the beautiful Prince's Farm, or even further out west, training these horses into show horses, whether it be led or whether it be ridden. There's so many facets of the horse industry that satisfies so many people.
Japanese was a length in front.
And it's so lovely seeing your horses that have, done well for your owners. I mean, Japanisme for the Inghams and Deb Kapitas and the whole family. Won a Coolmore Stud Stakes, earned over $1.3 million. And he's at Coolmore Stud, so he's really landed on his feet, hasn't he?
Yeah, and it's an important thing for the younger horses. They apparently like an older horse to follow and gives them a bit of confidence and just, I guess, slows them down. So that in itself is an animal welfare issue, making sure the young horses are looked after as well. So yeah, he was a great horse, and we could have chosen to send him on to other trainers and race at other jurisdictions, but the Ingham family chose to send him up to Coolmore, and they gracefully took him, and he's doing a fantastic job.
Tangled and all too, Hoi Ying.
So Tangled has had a couple of injuries in the past, being his suspensory. This time around, his last race was May, and that's when he did his injury. He damaged his digital flexor tendon. It's not a terrible injury, but being that he was such a good racehorse to them, they felt that rather than put him through a big rehab process again, it was better that he was just to retire and be happy. He did a month in the box. He's had 3 weeks in the yard. He's got another week to go. Then he'll have 4 weeks in the paddock before we can start some light work with him and just gently ease him into a workload that's suitable for him. Eventually he is going to be a show horse. Myself and my partner love hunting as well, so being that he has sustained a few injuries, his jumping career won't be extensive, so going hunting and relaxing and doing things like that would be fantastic for him, I think.
But he was a pretty young horse. We could have put him through another preparation and the rehabilitation stage, but the owners responsibly said no, he's done enough, and bringing him back one more time is going to be difficult. Now, finding a home for that horse, that you need to tell a new owner that you're going to have to rest this horse for 6 to 12 months. There's no guarantee of a positive outcome. Now, they are the champions of racing, those people that do take these horses on and end up loving them, and Tangled's certainly a great example of that, and the people involved there certainly deserve special recognition, more so than winning big races.
And McCreary as well. Well, he's been doing some eventing in cross country too. He was the winner of a Liverpool City Cup, a Kingston Town in Sydney, the Rolly Mile and races such as that. But he's found a really lovely place with Jen Lynch, who it might even wind up competing in police games and things like that. So the adaptability of the thoroughbred, I mean, you know more than anyone about how intelligent they are and their great athleticism. The equestrian world has seemed to, really been picking up on that again.
What a horse can do for someone, and the horses took us to the First World War and obviously times before that as well. They'll just run through a brick wall. I remember the late Rick Worthington saying he could teach a horse basically to walk on a plank and almost to jump off the end of the ship type scenario. So what you can do if you train a horse and what a horse will do for you is quite remarkable. And yeah, McCreary's only a little fella, but he's found a great home, and he'll be just loving what he's doing at the moment. And when these horses stop racing, they've still got a great life to live.
And horses that were kind of cult heroes, I suppose, in Australian racing to a degree, Who Shot the Barman and Tom Melbourne, they're now having a wonderful life at living legends. So they're actually promoting racing, doing a job to promote racing to a new generation who can get up close and personal with them.
I think bringing them to a place like Living Legends is fantastic. They love getting a pat or a brush, and the likes of Who Shot the Barman, like he ran in 3 or 4 Melbourne Cups and 1 Sydney Cups, and he's a household name basically. He might not be the best horse in racing, but he's certainly a horse that was well recognised. So yeah, Tom Melbourne, he's no doubt in the second paddock. He wouldn't be in the first paddock, but yeah, they're great stories, and we can have a laugh about them, and we don't just need to see them race on a racetrack. We respect them for a long time yet.
Buffering Terra Vista, Delectation bursts through.
He was actually a very tricky ride, so it was difficult for people to start with, and he might have been a horse in years gone by that was just forgotten and put out to pasture, but through this rehoming team that Racing New South Wales has got on board, they've just done a fantastic job, and to turn those horses around when they've been a little bit one-dimensional certainly is deserved of recognition to the highest level.
So what would you say to people, that might be in country areas, or they might be, in different states, or anyone training a horse, owning a horse? What would be the main advice you would give them about the best way to rehome their thoroughbreds?
I think the model should be that if you're entering into horse ownership, respect what the costs are involved, not just until they run their last race, just beyond that as well, and just be responsible. I think being responsible and just taking time for these processes to happen, whether they take a while to be rehomed or rehabilitated after an injury, it's not just run their last race and that's the end of the cost. There's a little bit left afterwards. They're great to us. Prize money in Australia is second to none in the world, and it can open, or anybody can race a horse in Australia, which is different to other jurisdictions. So in Australia, we can all share racing a horse. I think we can all share in looking after a horse beyond racing as well.
Always great to hear from the best in their field, and Chris Waller is certainly that. And thanks to Chris and the team for their support of Thoroughbreds Are Go. Coming up on the final edition of the show for 2020, we see some other familiar names retired at Vinery Stud in the Hunter Valley, and the final tip from the thoroughbred guru, Scott Brodie.